All right, it is 9:30. Let's get started, guys. I made a mistake. Today's our last day, and so the only thing you really need to do on the work for this week, let's just keep showing that. The only thing you need to do on the work for this week is going to be your chapters. Finish your chapters. That's it. If you do if you do Annabelle Lee, or if you do our other assignment, let's see what it is. After apple picking and theme from English, no, it's Annabelle Lee and after apple picking. If you did those and turned them in, that's going to be extra credit for you. So have fun. If you did any vocab unit 3, I'll check my email today. That'll also be extra credit towards whatever you did last week. So I was wrong the whole time about our schedule. I thought we had 3 more days after today. We don't. Today's our last day. I'm going to finish off Night today, all right? We're going to finish reading it, and then you're going to take a small quiz that I'm going to drop into the chat. It's just like last time. We're going to do a review. I'm going to give you that, and that last quiz for 7 through 9 will actually go on to your last grade. We'll just count that as your final, all right? If you have any questions while I am talking, go ahead and put them in the chat. I'll keep an eye on it to make sure that I see it if it pops up. Without further ado, let's start our wrap-up of Night. All right, so chapter 7, the train. They just loaded this train, right? It's got an open roof, and it's kind of snowing, and they've just marched a ton of time through the snow, like they said, over 40 miles. So the train goes on through the night. When light comes, Laser is unable to tell who is alive and who is dead in the car, including his father. Laser feels there is no reason to live. The night again serves as a literal and symbolic time of despair. This goes along with the active theme of inhumanity. The car stops in a field, and SS soldiers shout at the people in the cars to throw out their dead. The people in the car look for the dead. They take their clothes, and then they push them out. When 2 men try to take his father, Elijah snaps out of his daze and slaps his father until his father's eyelids begin to move. 20 bodies out of the 100 are thrown out of the car. The Jews are on the train. They're so beaten down that not only are they willing to strip clothing from the dead, they don't even make much effort to determine whether somebody is really dead or not before taking their clothing and throwing them. That's basically killing somebody, right? Because if they have no clothes and it's snowing, they're going to die. The train trip seems to last an eternity. The train moves slowly, and the people are not fed. They eat the snow to stay alive. They pass through German towns where Germans watch them. One day, a German worker throws a piece of bread into a car to watch the people fight each other to the death for it. Ordinary Germans, not just prison guards or soldiers, they also treat the Jews like animals, amusing themselves by pitting the desperate, starving, and dying Jews against one another. Other workmen watch this spectacle and begin to drop pieces of bread from their lunches into the different cars to observe the starving prisoners fight for them. When a piece is dropped in his car, Laser doesn't fight for it, but sees a younger man beat up his own father for it. The old man dies, and then the son is set upon and killed before he can even swallow the bread. The prisoners have totally lost their humanity at this point. Here, a son not only abandons his father in order to survive, as the rabbi's son did earlier, but actually kills his father for a piece of bread. A man named Meyer Katz saves Elazar's life when someone tries to strangle him. One of the most vigorous men left, Meyer Katz, is put in charge of the train car, and he breaks down and weeps for his son, who was taken at the first selection. He can't go on any longer. He wonders why the Nazis don't just shoot them. The train arrives at Buchenwald late at night, and the living disembark. Meyer Katz stays with the dead man on the train. In trying to stay alive, the prisoners for the most part don't seem to allow themselves to grieve, but at the limits of his physical endurance, Meyer Katz begins to grieve for the murders of his son. He gives up on life and lets death come for him. Let's go on to chapter 8. 2 more chapters left. At Buchenwald, Eleazar tries to stay close to his father. Waiting for the showers, people sit and lie down in the snow. Some of them die. Eleazar's father wants to rest, but Eleazar argues with his father, telling him not to. Eleazar feels like he's arguing with death itself. Eleazar's still fighting for his father's life, but now it may be too late. The sirens go off and the guards move the prisoners to the blocks. They sleep. When Eleazar wakes, he realizes that he went into the blocks without his father. For a moment, he hopes he doesn't find his father, and that his father is already dead and no longer a burden. It's a feeling he will always be ashamed of. Eleazar's guilt over these moments of wishing his father has died is an undertone throughout the book. You can see the way he pays special attention to the way sons fail their fathers throughout the book. Eleazar spends hours looking for his father and finally finds him sick with fever. His father gets sicker. The guards don't want to waste food on sick people, so Eleazar gives his father some of his own food. His father has dysentery. The doctor on duty, a surgeon, either can't or won't help him. Despite his sense of guilt, Eleazar makes sacrifices to try and save his father's life. Another doctor comes, but this one shouts at the sick and calls them lazy. Eleazar feels the desire to kill this doctor, but has neither the strength nor the courage to act. Other invalids begin to beat his father and take his food when Eleazar is away, because his father can't get up to go to the bathroom and he smells. There is only so much Eleazar can do because he doesn't have the ability to stay with his father all day. He is again stuck with the feelings of guilt about his powerlessness. Alright. A week goes by. The head of the block advises Eleazar not to give his rations to his father. The man tells Eleazar that he can't save his father, but he doesn't listen. He continues to give food to his father, but his father can no longer eat anything. His father only wants water, which Eleazar gives him. Eleazar stays in the invalid block, claiming to be an invalid himself, and takes the bunk above his father's. This is another risk for him, faking an illness in order to stay with his father despite everything, even common sense. He never gives up on or abandons his father. Delirious and sick, his father keeps begging for water, even when an SS officer yells at him to be quiet. The officer hits him in the head with a truncheon. Eleazar doesn't move. His father says his name, Eleazar, and begins to have trouble breathing. He jumps down and stares at his father's face for an hour to memorize it, bloody and beaten. It's time for the prisoners to get into bed. When he wakes up the next day, his father is gone, and a new invalid is in his place, and he is unable to cry. In the end, he doesn't know exactly when his father's died. Presumably, his father is burned in the furnaces, but he doesn't know if the Nazis waited until he was dead or threw him in while still barely alive in order to free up another bed. Despite their efforts to keep each other company and alive, Eleazar's father's death is anonymous after all. Last chapter. Eleazar spends another 2.5 months at Buchenwald. He is transferred to the children's block and no longer thinks or feels anything but the desire to eat. Without his father beside him, he's now just a body surviving. One day the SS are late for roll call, which never happens, when the loudspeakers call all the Jews to the assembly place. The children begin to move, but other prisoners whisper to them to return to the block. The prisoners fear that because the war is nearing an end, the Nazis will speed up the extermination of the remaining Jews. Since lots of Jews didn't show up at the roll call for the Jews, there's a general roll call the next day. The prisoners are told that they are going to be evacuated. 10 prison blocks each day. Buchenwald is being liquidated. There will be no more food rations given. Now they'll all be starving. A few days later, there are still 20,000 people at the camp, so the Nazis decide to speed things up and evacuate all the remaining prisoners before blowing up the camp. But an alarm goes off, and the prisoners are sent back to their blocks, and the evacuation is postponed a day. The prisoners have eaten nothing but grass and scavenged potato peelings for 6 days. The Nazis hope to destroy evidence of their death camps so they won't be held accountable after the war. There is an underground resistance movement within the camp. It springs into action, shooting and throwing grenades. The SS flees and the resistance takes over. That evening, the first American tank arrives. Only at the last minute, when the remaining SS units are fearful and relatively weak, are the prisoners able to reassert themselves as people and fight off the Nazis. At first, after the liberation, Eleazar thinks only of eating. 3 days later, he gets food poisoning and nearly dies. He spends 2 weeks in a hospital. When he's unable to get up, he looks in the mirror. He has not seen himself since the ghetto in Siget. He sees the face of a corpse, a face he can never forget. Although the book ends with his survival,
slightly harder than the last.
hold
I
on.
choose roll 9. With an explosion of speed, I leap out of my bed and I burst through the door as it slams behind me.
Alright, I had something else going on. Although the book ends with his survival, the lasting image from the final page is one of death. After witnessing so much death, the weak and starving Eleazar has come to look like death itself. For him, death has replaced God, love, family, and community as the one all-powerful fact of existence. Not a very happy ending for that book. There are many themes going out throughout the book. We're going to discuss those briefly. The first one is having and losing faith in God. We see that a lot throughout the whole book. I mean, the Jewish faith itself is very strong at the beginning, and as the prisoners are treated with inhumanity and seeing the death around them, he witnesses and experiences things that cannot reconcile with the idea of a just and all-knowing God. At the beginning of the book, he even says, I believe profoundly. He's 12 years old, and his life has literally been centered around Judaism. Studying the Talmud during the day and praying in the synagogue at night. But as you can see, by the end of the book, he's lost his faith at all. A man in the crowd in Buna asks, "Where's God now?" And Eleazar's internal response is that God is the boy on the gallows. The boy dies slowly as the prisoners are forced to watch. So lots of that running throughout the book. Let's talk about inhumanity. One of the legacies of the Holocaust is the sheer scale of one group of people's inhumanity towards other groups of people. In the case of the Jews, the German government and German society attempted to redefine them as subhuman and then as creatures who deserve to die. But Knight just doesn't focus on the Nazis and their seemingly endless diabolical behavior. It also focuses on the inhumanity and the atrocities that they're forced to commit on each other as their humanity is slowly stripped away from them. If you can strip humanity away from the Jewish people as a whole while they're in this situation, they will turn upon themselves and your problem will be dealt with. Throughout Night, Elie Wiesel makes a point that when people are treated as subhuman and subjected to the constant threat of death, they lose the ability to act as a decent person, even towards others in the same situation. Empathy is one of the most finest human qualities, but in a situation like this, it was completely crushed. Another theme is fathers and sons. We see that throughout the book. Countless numbers of fathers and sons. And it's probably put under a microscope like it is because of Eli's relationship with his own father and the fact that he's living through it. You ever hear that thing about when you buy a red car, like all you see on the street is red cars and you never really noticed them before? It's called a perception bias. And that's what Eli has throughout this whole thing. Because he's going through this situation with his father, he is much more sensitive and much more perceptive about father and son relationships around him. He's constantly comparing and observing the dynamics between fathers and sons. Last theme is guilt and inaction. On several occasions, Eli watches as his father's beaten and he can do nothing about it. Or would he rather perhaps help his father in the very short term, but would quickly pay for it with his life, right? His father, too, must watch powerlessly as he is whipped by a capo. Even through an act of small resistance, they know it would be suicide. So a lot of them feel guilty about the fact that they can't act. Even though he knows that acting would be suicide on his part, it doesn't make him feel any better about himself when the SS officer beats his dying father in the head, right? And he does nothing to prevent or retaliate. His final act of kind of retaliation and absolvement of this guilt is writing this book. He's taking action finally and trying through this action of book, of writing this and spreading the word, is preventing many other acts of brutality from going uncensored. It was first-hand accounts like this that really helped solidify belief in a Holocaust. You still have a really small radical faction out there of people, they're called Holocaust deniers, who say, you know what, this never happened. This is all something that was made up. It was done on a movie set and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's horrible. And it's through these first-hand accounts. It's through books like this. It's through the Holocaust Museum, like in LA, that the point is really driven home. That this was really something that happened, and we need to, in order to make sure this doesn't happen again, in order to make sure that there is no inaction in the future, shine a light on these atrocities and look out for them. Always, right? That's going to be it for night. Two main symbols in night. We have night itself. The night represents the worst periods of suffering during Elazar's experience in the Holocaust. And then we have fire. Madame Schachter's visions of the fire as she was gone mad during the train ride to Auschwitz, they're symbolic of the Nazi power to deliver death to Jews riding in her car. All right, that is going to be it for night. I had one person do a Flipgrid video. You have to do a Flipgrid video today, please. Just do it on the one that's still there. It's open. Make sure it's there. I'm going to upload the night test, the quiz right now, to the thing. What I would like you to do is go over and finish your study questions. Once you're done with those, you may use any of those to go ahead and take your final test on it. It's going to be, let's see, how many questions is that? 12 questions. It's not that bad. And you should be able to pass it with flying colors. Remember, this is going to be your final. If you have any questions about anything else, I'll be posting grades. I'll let you know by the end of the day. Actually, I'll let you know tomorrow what your grade is. If you have anything late or haven't done anything, I know there's a lot of people with holes in that grade book. Get those things done. I will grade them today, and I will send you your grade in the chat tomorrow in the morning, because I got to turn them in then. If you do not have any questions, you need to be in your novel groups right now, finishing up your study guide. Remember, if you did any of the poems this week, it's extra credit. If you did vocab this week, it's extra credit. What we need to focus on right now is finishing your study guide for night and then taking the 12-question test at the end. You can take it up 2 times for credit, so employ those test-taking strategies we talked about before. Any questions? I will be in here, and I will be looking at the chat. And everybody who thumbs up that thing from yesterday, I got 100 points for you. So good job for that. If there's nothing else, off to your groups. I'll be checking in with you there. Have a good one.